used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now today we will take a look at Superman from Earth 2 from the Crisis on Infinite Earths wave. Now, I don't really want to get into, the whole controversy about how this wave came about and how much it cost, and if you bought the bundle or if you bought them separate. Now, a couple of things I will say is I did end up buying two of these waves. Of course, one to open and review, and one to keep in my mint inbox collection. And I don't want to hear anything like, "Oh, how could you do that, Bones? Why'd you do that?" Because basically, no reason. I just like doing things like that. And what I choose to spend my money on is my own business. But I will say this, and that is that building up to review this figure, I did watch a couple of smaller channels and their review of this Superman. And I have to say that, most of them really enjoyed this figure, besides the price that, everybody did mention, especially because most of them only bought the Superman. So they ended up paying, around $46, $48, while I bought the waves. So I ended up paying more like $30. But of course, as I always say, everybody has to decide for themselves if it's worth it for them or if not. Now, me being a disgusting completist, it was almost a no-brainer. I did have to think about ordering a second wave for a while, but eventually I did go ahead and pick up another set. But anyways, let's get into this figure and see why a lot of people actually enjoyed this figure, while some other people are just not going to like it and say that it is trash. But let's find out for ourselves. Now, he does look pretty unstoppable in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. Now, another thing I will say is originally this was supposed to be basically a $20 figure. It was going to be a wave, so we do know that Build-A-Waves are $25 each. The extra $5 going towards the pieces to build the monitor. Now, this ended up not happening, and they only produced a small number of these figures. They didn't produce it like if it was going to go, nationwide. They only produced a small amount, which is why they ended up charging so much for the limited quantities. Now, you can say if that's right or wrong, but in the end, it is what it is. And I was actually really surprised to see how many people just bought the Superman on his own and didn't buy the full pack, which is pretty strange to me. But oh well. He also does come with his data file card. On the front, you do have some source material from the comics, an image of the Earth 2 Superman. Now, I do not know a lot about him, but I do kind of know that he is from a world that's like a more classic world where he really uses his powers to like protect his planet. And he's, basically a real hero, a real heroic Superman. But in the end, when the whole crisis thing happens, he he ends up having to go into battle with heroes from other dimensions and stuff. Like I said, I don't know exactly, but it is rather interesting, and it would be cool to look into it. On the back, you do have some information. Pretty sweet. We'll add that to the collection. Now, he does come with some alternate hands, which are not necessarily flying hands, but they are like palmed hands. But always cool to get an extra set of hands. Now, he does come with fists straight out of the packaging, which I consider something that is a must with your Superman figure. And the only other thing he comes with is the arms to build the monitor. Now we'll hold on to these. Eventually, I will be building that monitor. And the only other thing he could have come with that I do agree with everybody that sometimes McFarlane does really bad by us by not including this, and that is a flight stand. Now, it doesn't really affect me because I have hundreds of unused flight stands. I'm not kidding. But I do understand when people, this is the only Superman that they bought because a lot of the reviews I saw, the reviewers said that they're just big Superman fans. And I really think that they would have appreciated to have a flight stand with their Superman. But, decisions were made. Now let's go ahead and take a closer look at the actual figure. Now, first impressions, as everybody knows, this is an older, more, grizzled Superman. Uh, right off the bat, everybody looks at the head sculpt. Now, a lot of the times when you get a DC Multiverse figure, it takes a while for certain things to start growing on you. Now, I'm not necessarily sure that this head will grow on me, but maybe with some added dark wash to accent the wrinkle, adding a little bit of white to the temple, which is more accurate to how he looks in the comics. Here you could kind of see that they just brushed a little bit of gray on there. But aside from that, a lot of people have been anticipating this figure because of the clean suit design, the classic style of Superman costume that comes with this figure. Now, I have seen the negatives and I have seen the positives, but it is always rather interesting to get it in hand for my own opinion of what I actually think of the figure. So basically, I concur with everybody that said that for them, it's the classic, Silver Age Superman, very reminiscent of older styles like First Appearance. A lot of people comparing it even to like superpowers and animated TV shows and stuff like that. The only thing that would be a little bit different is, of course, the head sculpt, because this is representative of the Superman from the Crisis storyline and not necessarily your quintessential classic Superman look. But of course, you could pass it off as just classic Superman. One thing I really do like that pops off right away is that sort of baby blue, but a little bit more of a pale blue, not so bright. And for me, this has always been representative of Superman's real colors. Sort of what I based off my definitive Superman custom that I made. I wanted it to have that baby blue, but still with just a tint of dark in there. And this guy really pulls off the whole thing. Obvious thing right away is the cloth cape. We will take a look at that. Let's take a look at the head sculpt a little bit closer. Pretty much some Grumpy Cat vibes coming off of this one. It does kind of look weird though because you see the wrinkles and where there should be shadows, but since there's no added paint there, it kind of looks a little bit weird. And towards the end of the video, I will do like a dark wash on him, and that way you could see the difference of just the plastic look and then the look that comes with having a little bit more darker shadows and giving different tones to the face sculpt. But it is it is an older Superman. He's kind of been through it. Looks like he's seen, a couple of battles. A lot of cool details. You do have the curl there on the front. I'm not sure. I mean, it could grow on me, but for right now, I am undecided. You do got the little cleft on the chin, which will come out with a little bit of dark wash. You'll be able to see that a little bit better. Real stern looking eyes and definitely an older, more battle tested Superman. Take a look at the articulation. Does look down very well. Looks up pretty good. Could push it a little bit, but that's good for flying poses. You got right to left. And you can tilt his head for some attitude. Pretty sweet. Going down Now, here's another big difference is that I usually prefer to have sculpted out emblems. Now, this Superman symbol is actually a very unique symbol that is from the Earth 2 Superman, and they did just print it on. Now, there's a lot of benefits to this, and besides that, I do not mind if it's printed or sculpted. I pretty much look at the whole complete figure. So I'm not necessarily against printing the symbols, but this gives us a clean body, and that opens up the door to different characters using this body, or they can just print a different symbol or a different design. So there are some positives to having this clean body book. Really love the symbol though, it looks cool. Moving down into that belt. Now we will be talking about this and taking a closer look at the belt later on, but it kind of has a weird paint job that they did where when it hits the belt loops, it's not straight. It kind of has like a little rounded off edge, so that's rather interesting. But what is definitely cool is the wrinkles that they added to the trunks just to give it a little bit more of that fabric feel. So it doesn't look so plain and it matches a lot more with the rest of the costume where you could see some wrinkles in there. Pretty sweet. Let's take a look at the articulation. You do have side to side at the waist. You have the full tilt-a-whirl, giving you a lot of range. Lower waist swivel, upper chest swivel. You could twist them, get them in some cool poses. Not much of a crunch. That's very slight. You can kind of lean them forward there, but of course, leaning back is no problem, and that works best for flying poses. Let's take a look at the shoulders. You do have that socket and shoulder bushing design from McFarlane. It gives you a lot of range and movement. Got some up and down, front to back, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows. Look pretty clean, actually. A certain design that I haven't seen before. Doesn't have so much of that jagged cuts that we've seen. And you do get the full, collapsing of the joint that I really enjoy, which is a true double jointed elbow. Straighten them out. Moving down. Very clean costume. Nice to have just some bare arms with no design. Going down into the sculpted out wrist joint, which looks okay, and into these hands. Now, another thing, these hands are not giant hands. They're actually proportioned well to the figure. And they have a lot of cool little detail in them. You can see some of the veins and, details of the hands in there. And of course, you do get the 4 ways of articulation: bending, hinging, and swiveling. Pretty awesome. And on the other side, you have the same thing. So far, pretty nice, well designed figure. Haven't really seen any problems yet, but we shall see. Get them pretty simply in a T pose. One of the best T poses I've actually seen. And one thing I haven't said anything about is the articulation in this one is really smooth. I mean, it seems like McFarlane is really hitting his stride in the way they actually execute the parts of the figures. I just think he needs to add a little bit more attention to detail in certain things, but you can move the arms above his head. Pretty sweet. Let's take a look at the thigh swivel. Surprisingly, he does have some pretty nice thigh swivel, which means that you can move the boot from side to side without having a thigh cut that would really break up that beautiful sculpt work in the leg. Can kick up pretty high. Now, the trunks flex. That is why they are made of rubber, so you can even kick back. And when you put the legs back to their original position, the trunks go back to their original shape. Pretty cool. Can cock out the leg. He does have that McFarlane hip swivel, double jointed knees. Once again, a new design that is a lot smoother. Doesn't have that angular cut. Never really seen any like this. So it is a smoother way of doing the joints. Straighten them out. You have up and down at the ankle, right to left, nice rocker, and toe articulation. Pretty cool. Let's take a look at the lower body. New boot design, but it does look good. Traditional Superman style boots. Smooth costume, no no added details or piping lines or anything like that. And once again, something new here, and that is that when you move down from the calf into the foot part of the boot, you have that beautifully sculpted out ankle joint, which gives it a really nice, clean transition, beautiful silhouette of the boot, which actually makes it more like a real boot while you still retain that awesome articulation. Pretty nice design. Take a look at them from the bottom. No tread, but you do have some identifying marks. Moving up the back. Not too much in design or texture work, but you have cool added details like the trunks have a little bit of sort of faux fabric wrinkles. Everything looks good. You got a nice wide back. Musculature there. Awesome. Pretty cool. Pretty awesome Superman figure. Now let's take a look at this cloth cape really quick. First off, you got that big giant yellow S. Now, while we do want the yellow S, McFarlane, we kind of don't want it giant sized. Now, this does kind of work for this certain Superman because it is sort of like a unique yellow S. It does kind of match with this old classic Superman. But I just hope that if McFarlane uses this cloth cape again, he does change the yellow S for a different design. And that is a big hope that this body can be used for more future Superman. One thing I do notice is that here at the neck, I've heard a lot of people complain about the way it joins. But if you look at mine, it is absolutely perfect. I have no gapping between the skin of the neck and the blue of the costume. It's just perfectly executed. The wire just sits right over the shoulders. Really nice execution by McFarlane. I mean, if he messes up, I'll say it, but really nice way they designed this wired cape that you could articulate at your leisure. Now, a lot of people think that I don't like cloth capes. That's not necessarily true. What I've always said is that I like plastic capes and I'll accept cloth capes, but they have to be executed in a nice way. I don't like when they look, sort of clumpy and frumpy. I actually like the cloth cape to look kind of sleek. That way it doesn't look awkward sitting on the figure. And this wire cape has actually proven me pretty wrong because they did it really nicely. I mean, you don't have any over exaggerated like stitching. The material is really nice, has sort of like a texture on the inside and is a lot more smooth on the outside. Beautiful cloth cape, and it is wired so that, people could manipulate it, to their heart's content. So I'm happy for people who enjoy these. It does kind of upgrade the figure, kind of making up for things that it doesn't have. So you take the good with the bad. Now, I only have two major changes that I made. One being that I did paint the belt loops on the back because, of course, originally there was no paint on the back. Everybody has said this in all the reviews. Some people actually missed it because they're not actually looking for, stuff, negative stuff. They were just happy to have a Superman figure. But I cannot just avoid it and say, not even mention it. They did not paint the back. Now, who knows why this happened? It could have been a mistake in the factory, in China and like some crazy factories. So I did go ahead and paint the parts that are missing. Now, this was not easy because the way they painted it, it has sort of like a rounded off edge and it is really thick. kind of making it feel like a belt even going through the loops. So it took me a while, but I finally did match it pretty nicely. Now I did give it a matte sealer to tone down the glossiness of it because the rest of the belt isn't really that shiny. And I matched it up as best as I could. It looks pretty good and I am happy with it. And it took me, I'd say, about 20 minutes to actually do it. Now, I know everybody's not going to be happy and say that, oh, you shouldn't have to paint it, $40, you know. Originally, this was supposed to be a $25 figure. And if you think McFarlane has never, missed painting a detail, then I don't know what to tell you because he's missed paint loops, he's missed, blades on belts. There's always been some sort of detail missing, and just sadly, it had to be on this awesome Superman that for some reason they didn't paint it around. Now, I'm not defending it because either way, if it was for a $20 figure and they didn't paint it, or it was for a $100 figure and they didn't paint it, it is still not good practice. And everybody that is upset about that has every, right to be, and they are actually correct. But I'm just saying that I don't have time to dwell on that. I just went ahead and painted it, and I'm actually happy with it. And for me, it looks pretty good. So, getting away from that, the only other thing I did was I did go ahead and repaint the head. Now, I added a dark wash, added it to, the crevices and creases inside the face. And you can see it does make a little bit of difference. That cleft in his chin is really prominent now. The shading around his eyes gives him a more, soulful feel than just that plastic blank, no sort of life at all. This does look a lot better. And then I did do the hair. I added some matte black to tone down the shininess a little bit. And then I did add some more white and gray to the temples. Now, this isn't as easy as it seems. I have found out that painting temples is pretty hard because it's not just like a smear of white paint. You do want to actually add some different tones and streaks and like defects because of course hair is not always going to be perfect, or all the hairs are going to be one color. You're going to have strands and different colors peeping out from the rest. Like, that's why I added some gray. I do really like the way it came out. Now, before we go, I do want to do a couple of things, major questions that people are going to have. Now, first off, I did do some alternate heads. Everybody wants to see, different heads on the body. Let's start off with an easy one, which is going to be the first appearance collector's edition Superman head. Check out how this one looks on him. A lot of people say this is the definitive, old school Superman look. I think it looks all right. Now, I do have an alternate version of this one where he's actually smiling and showing some teeth. What do you guys think of this one? This is, my own custom, just to give him a little bit more of a smiley feeling than just a smirk, but it is a different look. Now, keeping it with this, smiling motif, we do have the classic Superman head on here from the recently released classic Superman. Looks pretty good. And that is something interesting about this figure that I noticed, and that is that all the Superman heads actually looked good on him for some reason. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Then, of course, we have my favorite smiling Superman, although he does look a little bit freaky. And that is the Rebirth smiling Superman from the Ultraman 2-pack. I'd have to say a pretty kooky looking Superman. Now let's go back to one of my favorite Superman heads, and that will be Superman 1000. Always makes a Superman figure look definitive, and this one is no exception. This one actually looks pretty good. Surprisingly, I wanted to try the Hush head on this one, And once again, it did not disappoint. Has its own certain comic book look with that classic Superman costume. Let's go back to the 90s and do some mullet Superman. Pretty interesting, but once again, it does look good on this body. Now we're getting out there. Let's go ahead and try some weird stuff. Here's the bearded Superman head on this body. Interesting. And finally, for a little bit of dark and eeriness, let's check out the Justice Lord Superman. Kind of gives him a pretty sinister vibe. Really weird contrast between the light, classic Superman suit and the dark, sort of evil looking Justice Lord head. Pretty interesting look for this Superman. Now you can easily pop out the hand and add the alternate hands pretty simply. And I did also find that if you find other hands, like they have these more, standard flight hands. I forget who these came with, but they were kind of big on the original figure, but they actually fit perfectly with this Superman. So that's another way you could get some more alternate hands to go with your figure. Pretty sweet. But I will be keeping him just the way he is like this for now. Maybe I could end up picking up another one to make a real cool custom, but I'm not going to do that until I have another one. And that's one thing that was negative about this, is that this is, one of the best Superman bodies, and it ended up being one of the most expensive. So unless they reuse the Superman body, it's going to be a hard time to use these for customs, because nobody wants to be buying a $40-50 figure just to rip it apart and make a custom out of it. So fingers crossed that we do see this body again. And that takes me actually into scale. Now, everybody has heard the rumors, and this is a big Superman, and that's actually what I have always championed. I didn't think that a lot of the Batmans were too tall. I just thought that all the Supermen were too short. So, first off, I wanted to put him up with the Year 2 Batman. Now, aside from both of them having cloth capes and having those classic looks of the costumes, they are actually spot on in scale. Just look at that. Now, for Batman Year 2 being one of the tallest Batman, you can actually see how this Superman fits right with him. Perfect fit. One of the best, world's greatest team ups that I've seen. But we could do with a head swap on the Superman. But for right now, this is fine. We're just looking at scale. And, I had to bring out my favorite Batman, one of the taller Batmans, and that is Batman Hush. Now, interestingly enough, this Superman is actually a millimeter taller than the Hush Batman. And in all actuality, that is canon, because in reality, Superman is about 6'3", while Bruce Wayne is around 6'2". So Superman should be normally a smidgen taller than Batman, although I would say that they're probably around the same height, because Superman wears sort of those flat-footed boots, while Batman a lot of the times wears a little bit more tactical boots, so it kind of evens out in height. But all in all, really happy with this Superman. I will be taking a look at the rest of the wave, but for right now, let's enjoy this new classic old school Superman and add him to the collection. But anyways, you guys, keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.